So imagine a place where time just seems to fold in on itself, a place where the divine and the mortal literally meet on the banks of a sacred river. We're going to dive into the story of Pashupatinath, a site of such immense spiritual power, it's captivated people for thousands of years. I mean, just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, on one single night for the festival of Mahashivaratri, you can get over 1.5 million people flooding this very spot. It's this incredible tide of faith, so powerful that it becomes one of the largest religious gatherings on the entire planet. And the whole story starts way back in the realm of gods. We're talking about a tale of love and grief that was so profound it literally shaped the landscape. And from that myth, it just grew and grew into this sprawling architectural marvel, eventually becoming recognized as a true treasure of human heritage. But here's the thing. Today, this ancient sanctuary is facing a very, very modern threat, one that really strikes at its very heart. So the big question is, how did one of the holiest sites on Earth end up at this crossroads? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go back, way back to the beginning. All right, so let's get into the spiritual bedrock of this place. You see, the entire meaning of Pashupatinath, everything it stands for, is built on this foundation of really powerful Hindu mythology. And if you don't get that part, you kind of miss the point of everything else. So, first things first, the name itself, Pashupatinath. What does that even mean? Well, it translates to Lord of all animals. And this is really important because it's a specific form of the god Shiva, not the destroyer, but Shiva as the guardian, the protector of every single living being. And that idea of universal protection, that's the core identity of this entire place. The origin legend. Wow, it's one of the most powerful stories in Hinduism. It all starts with Lord Shiva's grief after his consort Sati dies. He was so grief-stricken, he just wandered the cosmos with her body. And to restore cosmic balance, to pull the universe back from the brink, the god Vishnu scattered her remains across the land. And wherever a part of her body fell, a sacred site called a Shakti Peeth was created. Okay, and this is where it gets really fascinating. Right next to Pashupatinath is another temple, the Guyeshwari temple, and that's believed to be the exact spot where Sati's hips fell. So you have Pashupatinath representing the divine masculine energy of Shiva, and Guyeshwari representing the divine feminine of Sati. They're like two halves of a whole. And get this, a pilgrimage is actually considered incomplete if you only visit one of them. So that's the myth, but how did this legend become a physical reality? We're talking about a history written in stone, a story of building a temple for the ages. It's a tale of resilience, constant renovation, and just extraordinary craftsmanship that spans nearly 2,000 years. All right, let's walk through the timeline. The earliest evidence of any kind of shrine here goes all the way back to around 400 AD. Fast forward a bit to 753 AD, and a king builds the first formal temple. But what's truly incredible is its resilience. The main building we see today, it was completely destroyed by termites and had to be rebuilt in 1692. And then, in 1979, the whole world recognized its importance when it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I mean, just look at the architecture. It's a total masterpiece of the Nepalese pagoda style. You've got these iconic two-tiered roofs made of copper and covered in gold. The four main doors are intricately covered with silver sheets. But here's the mind-blowing part. It's not just one temple. The whole complex is like a city of faith, with over 518 temples and monuments packed in there. But look, this place isn't just a static monument or a museum piece. No way. It's a living, breathing place. Its heartbeat is the constant, powerful rituals that happen here every single day. Rituals that cover the entire spectrum of human existence, from life to death. And if you want to understand the sheer power of devotion here, just think about this number again. 1.5 million. That's how many people can show up for a single festival, the Mahashivaratri. I mean, let that sink in. It's an unbelievable testament to its power as a center for pilgrimage. And this is where you really see the profound duality of Pashupatinath. It's almost jarring. On one side of the riverbank, you have the vibrant, fiery Arati ceremony. It's this beautiful nightly celebration of life. And then, literally just a few steps away, on that very same riverbank, are the sacred funeral pyres, where the cycle of life comes to a close. Yeah, and this quote just nails it. It is possible to witness both life and death simultaneously. You've got people singing and having fun on one hand, and on the other, people are sobbing as bodies are being cremated. It's just this raw, unfiltered look at the entire cycle of life and death, all happening right there in one place. Okay, so this is where we pivot to the central conflict of our story, because that very same sacred space, well, it's now facing these immense pressures from the modern world, and these pressures are threatening the very things that make it holy in the first place. And here's the crucial thing you have to understand. The Bagmati River, it's not just some pretty backdrop. It is the absolute lifeblood of every single ritual here. Holy baths, cremations, everything relies on that river. So, what happens when the river, at the center of life and death, becomes biologically dead itself? Well, the data tells a pretty grim story. The overwhelming source of the pollution, we're talking 93%, is just domestic sewage from the city. But here's the real kicker. More than 95% of all that wastewater is flowing into the river completely untreated, just straight in. And it's not just sewage either. Get this number. An average of 70,000 plastic fragments flow through this exact section of the river every single day. The sacred water has basically become a highway for trash. And on top of this environmental crisis, there's this new, kind of complicated social pressure. A phenomenon has emerged that some people call dark tourism. This is where some visitors are drawn here not for faith, but specifically to witness the open-air cremations. Almost like it's a spectacle, not a sacred personal moment of grief. But, this isn't just a story of decline. There is a determined fight going on right now to try and pull Pashupatinath and its sacred river back from the brink. You could almost say it's a battle for its very soul. And thankfully, the fight is happening on multiple fronts. It really kicked off with citizen action, a huge river cleanup campaign that started back in 2013. Now, you've got government agencies stepping in, building critical things like sewer lines and treatment plants. And on top of that, you have international support from groups like UNESCO and the Asian Development Bank all pitching in. But we have to be realistic here. Despite all that effort, the river water is still a pretty significant health hazard. Why? Because the city is just growing so fast. The cleanup efforts are in this constant uphill battle. The water is still loaded with high levels of antibiotic-resistant bacteria from all that raw sewage. It's just not safe. And so that leaves us with this one big lingering question. Can this ancient faith and the sacred river that literally sustains it survive the intense pressures of the modern world? I mean, really think about it. The answer to that question is going to determine the future of one of the most sacred places on Earth.